I'll just go ahead and give everybody a couple minutes to finally come on in, but we'll get started here in a minute. How's everybody doing today? Good. It feels good to be in front of a room, kind of weird. Last year they had us submit a little video, and that was it. So I basically submitted a video and just waited to see if anybody would email and ask questions. So happy to be back. I try to make my presentations very interactive, so please feel free to ask questions as we're going along. My name is Craig Eppy. My father and I, and my brother have a firm down in Fort Lauderdale, and we do a lot of financial planning, but a niche of ours is special needs planning. And so that's going to be obviously what our presentation is on today. And like I said, feel free to ask questions. I'm going to try to give everyone a really nice overview of what I consider comprehensive special needs planning and what that information entails. So we're going to hit on a lot of different topics. And I hope to get your brains thinking enough and just overloaded enough to go, okay, I know this is things I got to think about, and where are we in time and place? What services am I looking at? What things do I need to create for myself and my family? And from there, again, please ask questions. This is the beginning of a process for people to really understand the spider web of information that they're up against and how to really get connected to all those pieces. So let's go ahead and get started. Like I said, this is going to be a conversation on special needs planning, and you'll see that there's an emphasis on retirement, because at the end of the day, I know when I look at a plan, I have to make sure that it works for a really long time. And that means I need to make sure that parents retire, and I need to make sure that the kids have their game plan set up once the parents get there, right? That's not the time we want to figure things out. We want to figure things out before then, right? So this is just a lot of legal disclaimer. Have to put it in there. There's my father. So he is actually who helped us get started in this line of practice. And it's actually because of a woman named Jackie Marins that kind of roped him into it. But ultimately, he's the one that started our firm. And there's myself. And there's really how it got started, which is with a woman named Jackie Marins, that she actually has 2 children, but her youngest has a diagnosis of severe autism, and she needed special needs planning in 1993 when it came into existence. That was the year that those trusts became available in the law. And she came to my dad after he had helped her with some life insurance and some basic things and said, you got to help me figure this out, right? And so that's really how it started, was her just pushing my father into it and saying, I know you could help me figure out all these pieces. And 28 years later, we've been really entrenched in this space. My father's a national expert on the topic, and he created a program through the insurance company that we're connected to that's actually the largest special care program in the country. So we spend a lot of time in the space, and we've had a lot of success helping families to success, whether we're talking about the financial aspects, or for me, of course, in topics like this, it's the special needs component, right? How do I make sure that benefits are in place and trust gets set up and all these things that are getting thrown at us? What are they? How do they work? How do I know if I need them for my own situation? And when should I address them? How do I look at all this stuff? So we're going to cover a lot of topics, like I said, today, and there's even actually a few others that I feel like aren't fully listed on there, but we're going to go through them all. And the design is to make sure that you have peace of mind, right? Yes, we're securing a financial future and all these things, but for me, it's peace of mind. If I know that you can tell me what you're worried about, and I can tell you where that service or structure is set up for you and how that's going to get used, you can have peace of mind and make sure that you go to bed every night knowing, here's how the game plan works, right? Here's how you turn the light switch on. Here's how you open the door to get into that room, right? So the first thing we like to talk about is, how did this stuff all come about, right? Special needs planning really exists because we were restricted by $2,000 in an individual's name to get access to the benefits that we wanted to get access to, right? And so how do I get SSI and government Medicaid and other government benefits, right, without disqualifying them? Because if they're in high school and they get a job, they could end up with $2,000 in a bank account, right? And so it's very easy and quick that we end up in this problem. And so the first thing we start off with is just ABLE accounts, because they are a newer thing. And they were an expansion to the rule, right? We like to think that it basically took the rule from $2,000 to $100,000. So now that if that child has up to $100,000 in their name, it's not gonna hurt them if it's in this account, right? And so they're very much structured to have more than $100,000 if you so choose, but $100,000 is where the benefits are gonna get another restriction all over again, right? So the purpose of using that account, even though you could get up to $400,000+ in it, we would never recommend it to be used that way. They are actually available in a decent amount more states, so that number is wrong, but there is a website that you can go to that shows you all the different state programs, and you're not restricted by state. So that's the cool part, that depending on their features, you can use whatever state you want, and they are a little restricted, right? So when we do special needs planning, I'm trying to make sure that I can get the services and the lifestyle that I want, right? And so it's not really for me always about the exact dollar amount, because everybody's situation is different when it comes to how much does everything cost. But I want to know that there's enough there, and accounts like these can still be a little restrictive, not only to that $100,000, but the way that I get money in there, right? I'm restricted to putting $15,000 a year. Yes. Yes.
Within the ABLE, how do you determine, or what standard or evaluation criteria do you use to assert whether you should put your money in one, the other, or two?
So his question is about the investments, right? When you put money in that account, you can treat it like a bank account and put it in like a savings type structure, or you can invest it in, I always like to go conservative, moderate, aggressive, right? I always like to help people understand that you can attack it and put it into things that are a little more aggressive, get a little bit bigger rate of return. But there is that concern of how is it invested? How is it going to be managed? And that's where the answer truly is every situation is different. And with special needs, we tend to go a little more conservative. But it really is case by case, because we certainly have clients that are ultra aggressive, and that inside an account like that, being aggressive is not considered an ultra aggressive investment move per se. And so it really is case by case. But I would always go conservative if we're not sure, right? Conservative is always safer than aggressive. And they are a really cool thing, right? They work like a 529 account, which means you can get money in there tax-free, you can get money out tax-free. There's all sorts of advantages to it, right? But it's restricted to certain expenses, so we don't want to overfund them for that reason as well, because I want to make sure I can control my funds, right? And there's some of the expenses, right? So there are, yes, question. Yes, every year there is a chance for you to have an issue, right? We like to say that there are filings once a year. I like to do it as an annual review of everything, and within that review, we're going to cover all sorts of things. But one of those things are going to be filings, just like you do, which it really is connected to SSI, right? That's the filing that it's connected to, because we're talking about their income potentially, right? And those kind of things, and that's where they might ask about those accounts. If you're funding this with your own dollars, right, then it's not really connected to their SSI until you end up with too much money in here, right? And then that's where they're just looking at the balance. So it is a flexible account, right? So there's a lot of ways that you can use it, like we were talking about, and like I was saying, not recommended for large investments. So, okay. So now that that's covered, let's move on to some of the things that I like actually a whole lot more, right? Which are all the things that I think get thrown at people in the beginning of special needs planning that they're not really sure how they work and what to do, right? All the legal aspects of things, because it's important, and we need to have just like a general understanding of what do I need, right? So there's a lot of documents that get thrown at us, and we're going to go through them here. So the first is the trust. A trust is a piece of paper. It's literally, that's it. There's words on a paper, and that's it. There's no asset inside it. You don't have anything it's a piece of paper, right? What we want for the trust is for it to own assets enough, right, that we are going to be able to have peace of mind that it can pay for what it needs to pay for, right? But the trusts are going to start in most cases as a revocable or changeable trust, right? Meaning you're going to set up the language today and it's kind of on the shelf ready to go, but it doesn't really come into play until something happens, right? But the moment something happens, it's going to become an irrevocable trust and we're never going to be able to change it again, right? Now there are legal updates internally that can change by law, the way that they're structured, but your words, your language to protect your kids can't be changed, right? Including the way the money is supposed to be spent. The problem with these trusts is they are unfortunately taxed at the highest tax rate of the day, right? So we can get about the first, I'd have to go double check the number. It's about the first $12,000 to $14,000 out tax-free. And then there's another like $2,000 to $4,000 in a tax credit on the medical side where you can get it up to about $16,000 or so of income. But the moment you want to take $20,000 a year out of the trust, right, you're going to be on that $3,000 extra, highest tax rate of the day, right? So if we have a trust that needs to distribute 50 grand of income, we're going to get taxed pretty heavy, right? And so there are some strategies that we use, but ultimately it is an issue that we are up against, right? There are some things we can do to try to alleviate the tax, but there's nothing to completely just hide from it in most cases. And that's where we need to understand it. Because when we think, here's what we're leaving to the trust and here's how it works, we need to understand what are the real expenses that trust has to pay for. It's not just the grocery bill and some of the basics that we're used to. It's the stuff that we're not thinking of too, right? And what it's designed to protect, right, is the government benefits first and foremost, right? And how we do that, how we maintain that in the trust going forward, right? Let's fast forward and the trust is being used. There's got to be people still that are overseeing it. So first and foremost is our trustees, right? Who are we leaving responsible for these things, right? Many times it might be a sibling or a cousin or someone that's, in the family. But we are very, very familiar with what's also called a corporate trustee, right? And corporate trustees essentially work for the bank, and they are going to be on the trust, right, as a listed trustee to take care of the funds. And if they accidentally, or not really accidentally, give the funds to Bernie Madoff, right, and lose all the money, there's recourse. You can sue that corporate trustee, right? So it's very safe in many terms, but they're expensive. Right? Corporate trustees, maybe you're going to find one for $6 grand a year per year, right? Many of them charge north of 1%, right? So if you talk about $1 million in a trust, that's $10,000 a year that they're charging. I can show you, I just helped a client. He had just shy $500,000 in his son's first party special needs trust. And we were able to get his expenses from one trust company to another from 14 grand to 10 grand. So we saved $4 grand a year. That'll help over time, right? It's a little bit, but it's still 10 grand a year on less than $500,000. It's expensive, right? And so we have to understand who the trustees are and who are going to be our role players, our guardians, right? Because these are people that we need to be thinking about now so we know how do we want to use them, right? And how do they change? You may have someone listed today that's a little bit older, and that's okay, as long as we know who the backup is. When grandma's 60, it's fine. When grandma's 85, it's a little bit tougher, right? And so we want to make sure we really know who we're listing in that trust, not just who we're protecting, but how we're protecting them. So some of the other documents besides the trust, right? And these are things that are a little more basic, except for that last one, right? Living will, healthcare surrogate, durable power of attorney. 3 basic documents that you need. And if your child is over 18, I like to call this a Band-Aid, right? You need to do guardianship, and we need to look at more comprehensive planning, but these are a great Band-Aid to give you a little bit of control. When you go into the doctor's office, that they'll look at you and they're not breaking the law, right? When your child is over 18 years old, they're an adult, right? It doesn't matter what their diagnosis is, they are an adult, and so these documents are very important. And then the last is my favorite one. It's letter of intent. And this is what my father used to call the letter to the babysitter. But for me, it's just every possible thing a parent can worry about. So you have this trust, and here's the house, and here's the money, and it's a great thing to help you structure things. It doesn't say what the daily schedule is, medication, waiver information, passwords and information for login for social media. I mean, you name it. There are aspects of your life I like to call parents. Parents are a living trust. While they're alive, they are the trust, right? But they're doing so much more than what the actual trust will do. And that's where that letter of intent for me is a huge piece of completing a life plan, right? To make sure that the light switch actually gets turned on, not just that we thought that there was electricity in the house, but that we tested it and we know how it works and what's going to happen, right? So guardianship. Guardianship is another huge one, and there is, fortunately, in the state of Florida, a third kind of guardianship called advocacy. I tend to find most people have heard of it if they've looked at guardianship at all, and it's what we tend to recommend most. We're not the attorney, but we do tend to recommend it most because it's not taking away all their rights, right? The first forms of guardianship are full forms of guardianship. They take away their rights to vote, right to marry, all sorts of things. Guardian advocacy says, give me control back of their finances. My favorite is we had a client that their daughter, they had advocacy set up, their daughter had an iPad, and somehow the iPad got unlocked, the charging ability of it accidentally. One day, $7,000 in charges. They gave their advocacy document to Apple. Apple got rid of the charges instantly. Right? Had they not had that, they're liable, right? She's over 18, she's an adult, right? So these things can be really important, and it's all about knowing your situation. I got plenty of parents kind of be, well, I don't need guardianship, my kid listens to me and it's fine. That's great until they get older, until something happens to you and it's not you that they're having to listen to, it's somebody else, and now there's things that we need to have structured so that you can pass those controls on. And if you're interested in looking it up, it's statute 393.12. You can look it up. It's not that long as far as a read of when you talk about legal things. This is a short read in legal terms, and I'm a big fan of it. So like I said, letter of intent is huge, right? And all of these things need to be regularly updated, right? And we really need that annual look at things to make sure that we're considering our current situation. It's so imperative to think about all those little pieces and how they come together so that we don't end up with a trust and no money in it, right? And it doesn't do anything. Or, we set up benefits and we go through all that work and then we end up with $2,000 in their account and we get disqualified, right? And so there's so much importance to that maintenance of the current situation, and that's where we're big believers in that annual review, and that's something huge that we do with our clients in the process, because if not, what I did 5 years ago will get out of date. We'll end up, the 13-year-old's going to be 18, and it's going to be a different situation. So some common things that we want to make sure to update, and we put these up here because I tend to find it's pretty interesting how much there is that can be updated and what people didn't realize had a beneficiary designation to it. The reason this is so important in special needs is because of the probate process, right? When someone passes away, if their documents are not set up right, it goes to probate. If it goes to probate, probate is going to look for next of kin. So if you're a married person with kids, your next of kin are your kids. And it will distribute equally. So if you've got 2 kids, that's 50-50. And they don't care if it disqualifies benefits. They will look at it, know that it's going to disqualify benefits, and still distribute the assets to them and disqualify them, right? And so it's important to look at the titling, because there's a lot of these things that they may pass by directly beneficiary designation, right? Not just to the estate of the heir, right? Or to the heirs of the estate. So there's a lot of documents that you want to make sure that you're looking at and making sure that those beneficiaries are updated. I mean, this is huge for me. This is the difference between all the work we do in going down the drain, because something like this doesn't end up, and we could do fantastic work and ruin it all with one asset, The look back on these benefits when someone loses them is somewhere around 3 to 5 years, depending on the situation. And that's after you spend the asset down below the number. So if you've got accidentally a house that went into their name, they got to sell the house, spend the asset of that house, get it below $2,000, then the 3 to 5 years begins, right? So they're going to force you to spend your asset because you're worried about benefits, but now you're going to spend an asset way too quickly. I mean, it's forcing you into making really bad decisions. So, and what it really comes down to, right? If you fail to plan, you're planning to fail, right? My clients that come in the door, I love telling them that the first step is that they're engaging with me, right? That is the first big step, and that I can promise them they are going to make such a bigger difference in the way that these things turn out just by doing that, because I actually happen to call myself a hired pain in the butt, right? And so I make sure that people get things done because I know how many pieces are to this spider web. And I know how easy it is to put it on the desk and get back to work and get back to raising your kids and all the things that you have to do. And that's why we have a process like this, because it's too much for any one person to handle on their own. It's a full-time job. That's what I do for a living. And when I do that, I'm playing the quarterback, right? You've got to make sure that you're getting a ball downfield to receivers or out to a running back, right? If hopefully everyone follows a football analogy. Well, I play quarterback, right? Because there's government benefits that we've already been talking about a little bit. We're going to talk about them more, right? We've talked about some of the guardianship and the legal aspects. That's the trust attorneys, right? Then you have guardianship attorneys, right? They can be very separate. Sometimes you end up with same attorney for both of those services, sometimes separate. It really depends on the situation. And then the accountant is really important too, right? There's a lot of deductions that you guys can be taking in your situation that you need to be aware of, right? I'm not the accountant, but again, that's why I like to play that hired pain in the butt, because I know all the little pieces that are important, and I'm going to make sure that we're prodding things in the right direction. And for you guys today even, the accountant is huge. Yes, for the trust and making sure we have it structured so we know who the trust is going to use. But for you guys today alone, there are values in having a good accountant that really knows the deductions inside this space, right? And so that's what I do, is I really play quarterback. And what I'm trying to do is make sure that everything happened, right? So the sources of benefits, right? You got Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare. For you guys, Social Security is mostly going to be referred to as SSI. But when you also go on Social Security, that SSI is going to get added with an additional SSDI, right? SSDI is based off of someone that's paid into the system. Well, you've paid into the system, and your child, based off their disability, qualifies for survivorship benefits. So if someone was getting, let's say, $700 or $800 a month and their parent goes on Social Security, we're likely to see it jump to about $1,100, $1,200, $1,300 a month, right? And so is it a crazy amount of money? No, but it certainly is a nice jump that we absolutely need to be making sure that we're getting, and we need to make sure that these things are in line so that they're there and never to be messed with down the road, right? And then we have to consider room and board and therapies and all sorts of other things and services that some of them can be covered by Waiver, right? Which Waiver, I don't know if Waiver's on this sheet, it's not, but Waiver is one of the most misunderstood benefits. I actually just saw, I think that Ron DeSantis on Friday had announced that they're adding some money to APD, which is fantastic news because there's a waiting list, right? If your child is out on their own, not living in your home, they could probably get on the benefit. But if you have a 7-year-old kid that's in need of services and you need Waiver, they might say, sorry, you're on the waiting list, right? Unless you have an emergency situation, right? Something that is really pushing it to the edge. So there's a number of those kind of things, but they're very documented. So it very much has to be an emergency to qualify. But if God forbid the parents were in an accident and now this kid is on their own, that's an emergency, right? Like, so there are some things that are going to immediately qualify where you can have a little bit of peace of mind that it's not like they can't get on this benefit even if they're on the waiting list. But getting on early helps so that you can have peace of mind that by the time they're in their teens, they're on it. And you can sign up as early as age 3. So it makes sense. I mean, most people don't have diagnosis till a lot of times, into age 1 or 2. So by 3, they actually allow you to sign up, right? And then you have to think about the special needs trust, right? It's like, okay, so here's what's getting covered, right? But if I have $1,200 a month and my rent is $800 a month or $700 a month, I've got, $500 left to cover food and all these extras. I need to know what the special needs trust needs to cover above and beyond it, right? And that's why I like to call you guys the special needs trust, because you're funding those things today, right? And it's just quantifying it, understanding that separation of expense so that you can go, okay, here's what actually needs to continue for the trust. Here's how all these things work so that we know what do I need to have in there, right? And the way that we help people figure out what you need in a trust, and I do like to consider the funding the most important part. Every part of special needs planning is important, okay? So I don't want to make anyone think that one thing might be more important than the other, because it's very hard to say. I mean, you talk about any one of these trusts or guardianship, I mean, it's like, how could you say something was more important than guardianship? Well, if the money isn't there and something happens, I got nothing, right? And so I always talk to a parent, I'm like, if I have to do a trust or a life insurance policy, I want to do a life insurance policy first. Why? Well, because if something happens, I got a pile of money there. I'll go take the first $2,000, $3,000, and I'll go to the attorney and get the trust done, right? The sibling will get the trust done. But now there's actually money to put in it, right? To sustain all these things that we needed on the last slide, right? So with my clients, we go through a comprehensive process of breaking down all this information so that we can start to get organized, right? And really go through all the pieces of what's going on in life, and it can be pretty intensive, right? So not everyone needs all of the things that you see in these kind of charts. I just like to put it up as the example to help people understand that we go through a process because we have to look at the legal aspects of things. We have to look at the financial aspects of things. We have to look at how they come together. And the weirdest thing for me is that I don't see attorneys doing, or really anybody in special needs, doing that comprehensive work to really make sure that people understand how this works. I mean, I get clients coming to me asking me how their trusts work. They have a trust. They sat with an attorney. The attorney did not help them understand what it is, right? And so we have to break it down into pieces and make sure that we know what we're up against. And we have to have a place to keep it organized, right? So once we get a plan in place and we've understood here's what we make and here's what we spend and here's what will happen if I don't change anything, right? Here's the trajectory of what's happening and how my life is going to pan out in relation to my concerns, especially for special needs. And we need a place to organize it, right? And to keep up to date. You had asked, what do you recommend? I can't remember who it was. I think him back there, right? And I was like, well, you got to update it every year. I need a place to stay organized, right? And I prefer it to be digital. So in my example here, and I'm going to jump and let's see if this will work with me here. It was giving me a little issue before. Here we go. Oop, hold on. There we go.
What?
Oop. Sorry about that. Might just be a lag issue here. Hold on. I'm connected. Let me refresh this. Well, if my internet isn't strong enough, we'll skip the video, but it's just a software that I like to show people that helps people understand what does organization look like, right? What are all these pieces and how do they come together? And the video in not even 2 minutes does a great job, but it doesn't seem to be loading here for me, so we're gonna go ahead and skip that. Oops. Go. So what that website would have shown, unfortunately I wasn't able to get it up, but ultimately what that video is, it shows that we need a place to organize, right? So in there I have a storage vault where I can organize all my documents very clearly. I have an organizations tab where I can organize the accountant, the attorney, the doctor, the financial advisor, the guardian, all the different role players and have them clearly listed, all the different kids. All sorts of plans can be organized inside there, right? And then, of course, I'm a financial advisor at the core, we have financial software in there. So people can organize their finances, so they can see debit cards, credit cards, mortgages, all those things, and how they come together and how they change over time. So that when someone looks at their finances and goes, okay, I'm seeing my picture today, and in 5 years I should be here to be on track for where I need to be. Well, I need that ability to then do that. I want in 5 years to have a thing that shows me all my things, so I can go, okay, here's where I said I was going to be, here's where I am, how far off am I, or how close am I, right? So that I have a place that is always organized, always up to date, that we can organize all this information. Because for me, that's the problem the biggest problem I was having with clients was they would come with bags of stuff, and they were barely able to figure out what stuff they needed to show me, let alone use it the moment something happened, right? Because the moment something happens, they're not using it. Somebody else is, right? And so it's got to be organized. And ultimately, we're not very risky, right? So we're trying to find ways to reduce risk because we're looking to try to solve things for a very long time, right? If I have to solve what we like to call the double retirement, then I want to find ways to increase safety and reduce risk and find ways to give people, not necessarily that everything has guarantees, but as much of a guaranteed structure as possible where you can see here's how I know things work, right? Here's Social Security and here's the gaps and all those things. I need to understand it. And then, of course, the value of doing this kind of stuff now is you get to take your time, right? I love working with people where we put a plan together and we're talking about things that they know they don't need to make a decision yet on, right? We're talking about, oh, well, when he gets closer to 20 and he's going to be moving out, I know I want to figure out, what kind of good group homes are in the area at that time. Awesome, right? I love it. I love being able to have a game plan. And when we finish the plans that we do, we literally put a to-do list together. And I break it down by section. So it's, here's where we identified you needed more life insurance. Here's where I identified you needed to do certain documents. We wanted to save an extra $500 a month, and here was our budgeting strategy to do so. Anything that it could be, whether it's finance, special needs, or just general planning related, we're going to get it into a timeline, into a to-do list, and start knocking it off. And that's why that's why that other sheet showed quarterly meetings, because we're trying to keep people consistent and getting to the right place at the right time. And that's really it. At the end of the day, we offer a lot of services, and my special needs planning comes out of the financial planning silo, right? So it's in financial planning services, this right side of the page here, where the special needs planning comes into play. And I'm very big on implementation, right? So if someone says, I need to sign up for Waiver, I'm giving them my PDF that I created to sign up for Waiver, and I'm making sure that it's done. So in a week from now, you're going to get a call, and it says, hey, you said you were going to sign up. Did you fill out the application? Because we got to fax it in because there's no online form. Did you get it done, right? Because I don't care that I gave you the instructions. If a teacher gave you a homework assignment and you didn't turn it in, how happy was the teacher? Not happy at all, right? And so I want every homework assignment turned in for my clients because then I know we got it done. And then when I review with them once a year, it's easy to check it all off the box and go, oh no, that doesn't need to change this year. That's perfectly fine. Oh no, they changed programs this year. Let's update that letter of intent, or let's change that thing. And we're not missing it. Most we're going to be off is by 6 months, let's say. And that for me is success. So if you guys have any questions, I hope this session was informative to give you a little taste of all the little pieces of things that you guys are up against. And I do mean it. If you have questions, please come ask. I know I handed out those sheets for everyone to fill out. Be happy to collect them. And if you put your contact information, I will be happy to reach out and set up a consultation. It's not on there. I have a link that I can send anybody with my Calendly link to set up a 15, 30-minute consultation if they do want to ask questions about any of these topics. I'm not the attorney. What I am is a comprehensive expert, right? And so I have a lot of resources and a lot of knowledge on pretty much every topic in special needs. And if I can't answer it, I have the resource to do so, right? And I will tell you that I don't have that answer, right? Like, oh, that's an interesting question. Let me ask this person because what you're asking is technically legal or whatever, and I don't need to pay these resources. I can just go ask a question. So happy to use my resources for you. So please, if you turn those in, I will reach back out to you. And like I said, any questions, I'm here to help. Thanks.